Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, Egypt's digital battle. Is social media now being subverted by those in power to push political agendas and gain even more control? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is handling all your live feedback from Facebook, Twitter, and our stream website. And whenever we put things like Egypt and Muslim Brotherhood and anything about social media on any of those platforms, we get a ton of response.
We get responses. We're getting responses today, tweets and video comments from detractors and supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood. But even those who are critical of the Brotherhood say that they can't deny the powerful presence that they have online. Yeah. So for those of you at home, if you agree with that sentiment, let us know. Join the conversation by using the hashtag AJStream.
And joining us in studio is Adel Iskandar. He's an Arab media scholar at Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C. He's also the co-editor of Jadaliyya.com, an independent online magazine produced by the Arab Studies Institute. Adel, welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having me.
We are glad you're here. Remember, you can stay in touch with the show on a number of social media sites. You can follow us on Twitter, and you'll see links to some of the videos and websites featured in this and other programs. Just go to twitter.com/AJStream.
Hi, I'm Chloe Angel. I'm an editor at feministing.com. I write about sex, gender, pop culture, and politics, and I'm in the stream.
Many credit the events of the Arab Spring with the power of social media and its ability to harness the masses. People worldwide were taken to Cairo's Tahrir Square via various platforms, cementing the idea that the internet was a critical force driving the uprising. And although the ruling Muslim Brotherhood is known for underground activism and an early rejection of social media, it has now embraced platforms like Twitter and Facebook. Realizing the power of these tools, it also allegedly employs what are called e-militia foot soldiers to troll the internet and interject pro-party messages into online conversations. For example, on a pro-revolution Facebook page that was critical of the Brotherhood, two separate profiles posted the exact same comment. Parts of the post read, "The election was very fair and free from rigging. The majority of Egyptians elected President Morsi, so let's give him a chance. I swear to God that I'm not from the Brotherhood." Earlier, we spoke with Sandos Assem, senior editor of the Muslim Brotherhood's official English language website, ikhwanweb.com, who denied the allegations.
I think the Brotherhood supporters on social media, and especially on Twitter, they identify themselves clearly as Muslim Brotherhood members and supporters. The atmosphere of fear and this sense of fearing to reveal your identity is over after the revolution. I think we have an environment of freedom on social media and on Twitter. And you can clearly spot who is a Muslim Brotherhood member and who is not.
So, now in post-revolution Egypt, have online technologies that were used to topple President Hosni Mubarak been co-opted by the country's political power players? Joining us via Skype is Ramesh Srinivasan, Associate Professor of Media and Information Studies at the University of California in Los Angeles. He also just published an in-depth piece on today's topic entitled "Taking Power Through Technology in the Arab Spring." You can read that on our main website at aljazeera.com. Also with us from Cairo is Sharif Gaber. He's an activist with Moserine. That's a nonprofit media collective born out of the explosion of citizen media and cultural activism during the revolution. Welcome to the stream, guys.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be with you here.
Ramesh, what we just heard from a Muslim Brotherhood spokesperson was that she denied allegations that the organization was divisively using social media. Where does Egypt's social media revolution stand? Is it still activist-driven, or has it really been infiltrated by politicians and their proxies that are just posing as regular citizens?
Well, what I was writing about in this piece called Taking Power Through Technology in the Arab Spring is that these technologies have a cachet in Egypt that they probably didn't used to have. We see a tripling of Facebook accounts, a doubling of Twitter accounts. And because they have this type of cachet, all these political actors across the map, from the left to the right to the Brotherhood to the generals and the Supreme Council themselves, are using these technologies. They're appropriating these technologies to try to subvert other parties that they compete with, but also to extract political gain both domestically as well as internationally. So this is really what I'm looking at. But that creates big messes for each of the political parties across the map. And this is what I'm trying to analyze in my work.
Adil, Facebook was once considered the voice of the revolution. Is that still the case?
I think it was a misnomer then and is a misnomer now. To a large extent, I think Facebook provided a platform for young people who were deeply engaged, politically engaged, to convene together and push for some sort of action on the ground, and they were able to translate it into the streets. But to expect or to assume that Facebook is both the face of the revolution and was able to bring the millions of people into the streets in Egypt and speaks for them is deeply problematic. There's a digital divide still in Egypt. Ramesh pointed to an accurate fact that there is a substantial increase in the number of Facebook users, but still the majority of Egyptians are deeply disconnected from the social media spheres, and that means that anything that represents the populace at large has to become sort of a subterranean movement. It has to connect with the ground. It has to connect with the streets. It has to connect with every subset and every cross-section of Egyptian society, and Facebook still has not accomplished just that.
Well, speaking of connecting on the ground, Sharif Gaber, you're an activist. Tell us a little bit about what Mosireen is, so people understand the kinds of things that you're doing in Egypt.
Well, like you said in your introduction, Mosireen is a independent media collective operating in Cairo, born out of the Egyptian Revolution. And what we do is we attempt to create and support a media that supports the revolution itself. At times we've realized that both the state media with its censorship and kind of own agenda, but also the private media and satellite media channels, which have their own self-censorship and conservatism at times, we're not representing the revolution, whether that's basic events happening on the ground, or whether that's the kind of larger picture of what the revolution aimed for in terms of its social justice goals. So we do a variety of things, including training and providing a space for people to operate. We support revolutionary campaigns, and we also produce video material and cover events that we see as supporting the revolution and its actions.
Well, we asked our online community the same question, whether or not they think that it's been co-opted, social media has been co-opted by political groups. We got lots of answers. This is from Ahmed, who says, the Ikhwan, or the Brotherhood, is more organized and the original activists are just fighting each other. Ramesh, there's another tweet here from Andy Carvin who says he wants us to talk about the expansion of Ikhwan, or the Brotherhood, online versus discord among online seculars and liberals. Can you speak to this this idea that there is discord among the activists and they're not organized?
As Adel mentioned, much of the Brotherhood's success lies in its ability to organize within local neighborhoods and what we call build street types of connections, classical community grassroots organizing. However, the Brotherhood now increasingly has to maintain an international presence and international credibility. So as a result, it's trying to go more digital. Even though it has been digital for many years, it's trying to increasingly become even more digital. But that creates a cacophony, right? Because the Brotherhood was always a very hierarchical, tightly controlled information type of organization. But now in this new era, if all different Brotherhood members have their own personal Twitter accounts, as well as there's a Twitter Arabic account and a Twitter English account, and these things are saying different, these different accounts are relaying different types of information, it creates discord within what one would perceive to be the reality within the Brotherhood. So sometimes, as I argue, if the revolution has done even more for social media than vice versa, then we actually see lots of potential powers and problems associated with that dynamic.
So, Ramesh, you're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, who is known to be a very, very structured organization, very defined hierarchy, as you mentioned, but it is difficult to maintain with separate English and Arabic social media accounts, which it has. And this was really evident back in September during the protests over the anti-Muslim video. The U.S. Embassy in Cairo called out the Muslim Brotherhood for tweeting messages that supported the U.S. on its English Twitter account, but then it was rooting for protesters on its Arabic page. So we asked Sandos Assem, she's the senior editor for the Muslim Brotherhood's English website, it's called Ikhwan Web, about this incident. And here's what she said.
We believe it's it's misleading, and it was a very unprofessional tweet by the U.S. Embassy Twitter handle. And in fact, we believe this is not true. There is no discrepancy whatsoever between the Arabic English official messages. In the English websites, including Twitter, we publish the same message that is published in the Arabic websites.
So, Ramesh, did the embassy get it wrong, the U.S. embassy?
I mean, remember, the Twitter Arabic and English feeds are administered by different people, possibly in different locations. Some of the Twitter English feeds, or the main Twitter English feed, is administered out of New York City, sometimes by, folks from the Brotherhood who are in different locations around the world. So the idea of these different feeds and these different individuals that administer the feed being in tight hierarchical organizational structures, the way the Muslim Brotherhood traditionally functions, is challenged by the nature of social media itself. So this is what creates these discrepancies. And this is exactly what I'm talking about by saying that taking power through technology in the Arab Spring is actually creating some problems and some potentials for actors across the map.
Adele, you want to weigh in on this?
I think one of the problems that we're facing is trying to identify the difference between a regular citizen / protester and a member of a political party or a collective, if you will. And now I think everyone in the Egyptian polity is trying to evoke a language of dissidence, a language of pro-revolution. So even though the Muslim Brotherhood may have been latecomers to the political action in Tahrir Square and elsewhere, to continue to survive as a political force in post-Mubarak Egypt, they have to be revolutionary. And they have to adopt the platforms and the technology that have gotten credit for these revolutionary
But there's a difference between adopting these kinds of platforms and technologies and being divisive, which they're being accused of misrepresenting themselves.
Sure. I think to a large extent, the one thing that is consistent with the Egyptian political scene right now is that it has become divisive. It's become divisive between those who support the Islamists and those who are, opposed to the Islamists. Call them what you will. It's also divisive between those who support transformation of the economic environment in one way versus those who want to enshrine more free market sort of economies of the old Mubarak regime. So there is fragmentation on every level, which I think feeds into the Muslim Brotherhood's ability to benefit from having a hierarchy. You need to have your ducks basically in order to be able to make things happen on the ground and in social media. But in the process, the problem that the Muslim Brotherhood faces, which I think Ramesh was pointing to, is the fact that they have to make it seem as if it is authentic, it is real. Their actions online are real, they're not organized, they're not top down, and they're not hierarchical, when in reality they are. And it's becoming more and more evident the more we examine the online spaces and how they use them.
Well, members of our community are saying that this was inevitable and this was going to happen. Nirvana on Twitter says, Ikhwan didn't overtake online activists, but the activists failed to transfer their activism into real life. And Sharif, I want you to listen to this video commenter and let me know what you think after.
One comment I'd like to make is that for these political figures to be on social media is a very strategic move on their part, because social media is all about reach. How many clicks does something get? How many retweets does something get? How many times is this photo shared on Facebook? All of this serves a purpose, which is to reach more people that otherwise may not have been in the audience on the ground. So for SCAF to issue a communique on Facebook, or for Ikhwan Web or the Muslim Brotherhood to tweet something on Twitter, means that they're reaching more people. And for politicians, that is an invaluable tool.
Sharif?
Well, I think that this is true to an extent, but on the one hand, we talked about the digital divide. Ramesh mentioned it, and I mentioned it. And on the other hand, I mean, it's clear to me that Twitter and Facebook are walled gardens in many ways. You share with your friends, you like something and your friends see it. Twitter, you follow a community of people who generally you tend to agree with, unless you're intentionally following people who you want to disagree with, in which case you simply don't believe them. And I think that what we found as Musarreen is that we began experimenting with taking things off of the internet, taking video material that we ourselves had produced, attempting to create a counter-narrative to the lies of the government and the military, starting with the Maspero massacre last October. And we began doing street screenings with these things by setting up projectors. First time we did this was actually with old archive material that we'd gotten from the 18 Days in July. And then this exploded in December and January with the Askar Kezibun campaign, which is the military are liars. And there we saw that changing of narratives happened not through Facebook and Twitter, not even through the power of state-controlled media, but by basic movement out into the streets, taking video material, taking this stuff to neighborhoods. There were hundreds of screenings going on throughout Egypt during these months, of these videos which exposed the lies of the military. And I think more important than just showing that, it was the fact that this was happening in front of people, with people coming together in public. Media being made public, which social media is actually a bit anti-social, I'd argue, at times in doing that.
Ramesh, something like that project is incredibly provocative. It's obviously putting the group on a collision course with the government and/or the military. How do you see that playing out?
So the acts of groups like Mosireen, as well as the groups, some of the youth and leftist groups, are actually engaging in very, very interesting actions that actually break the pipes up of the internet, so to speak. So we often assume that social media requires internet access, but actually empowering oneself through technology doesn't necessarily need the infrastructures of access. And what Mosireen is doing is actually working in a much more tactical manner. I observed this type of action in person when I was at a 23,000 person sit-in strike at a factory in Mahalla, where a lot of the labor movement came out of in Egypt, dating back to over 10 years. And what I noticed at the strike was there were a number of working class laborers there, but there was a young man there named Mohammed, who was only 22 years old, and he clearly wasn't one of the laborers, but he had a video camera, and he was using that video camera to document what was going on, interview the laborers, and then he built it up through his blog, circulated via various networks, posted it on Twitter, and then eventually this became a globalized news spectacle, and therefore pressuring the top down, the powers that be, from the bottom up. And this is really interesting. What Mosireen is doing, to me, is absolutely fascinating, because they're actually bypassing all the hierarchies of distribution and production that are associated with the internet, not to mention older media. They're actually training activists to make content themselves, not just activists, but people across the nation, and project that content in their own communities, because people's own stories associated with their own communities are actually what really resonate with people. So they're breaking those chains and those hierarchies of internet top-down distribution. And that's what makes, I think, what Mosireen is doing so promising.
Well, Adel, it was just mentioned, Sharif mentioned Oscar Kazibun, which of course translates to the military as lying. There's a tweet here that from Oscar Kazibun who says, "We reach non-internet users by doing screen shows. We almost covered Egypt and some other countries, so we engaged directly to them." There's also another video commenter here who mentions that. Have a listen.
Hi, my name is Jessica Said and I go to University in Ohio, and although I think that there is a disconnect between offline and online citizens in Egypt, I still think that activists do a good job, such as the Oscar Kazibun campaign, which showed videos of SCAF injustices in the streets to people who wouldn't usually have access to social media, and thus bridging that gap and creating a difference this way.
But in a country, of course, where the majority of people don't have internet, is enough being done to get this message out?
Well, I think if we, exactly as Ramesh explained, and of course the work of Sharif and Mosireen, I think Kazibun and campaigns of the sort have actually recorded significant amount of success because of the fact that they decided to do what is most uncomfortable. I mean, it's a very difficult process. It's an uphill battle to be able to find projectors, transport them into the streets, find safe locations. They were targeted by the police. They were targeted by thugs who were supportive of the military. I mean, it's a very, very arduous process. But they were able to record a major uptick in negative perception of the military in a very short time period. And I imagine that Oscar Kazibun and Mosireen will become a model for future online to offline activism, not just in Egypt but beyond. We're going to be looking at this experiment very, very closely. But the problem the problem for the military wasn't just the actions of Mosireen and this type of work, but it was rather their inability, their sort of clunky way of using technology. They were entirely out of touch. These Pandora's box institutions, whether it's the military at one point and then now the Muslim Brotherhood, slowly needing to open up and become less secretive, less contained, less insular. That's what makes it very, very difficult. The military's Facebook page, SCAF's Facebook page, had 1.2 million followers in its first maybe 2 months, but well into their 18 months of rule, most of the people who were going onto their page were actually posting profanities or criticizing them and bashing them. They weren't really following them because they had any strong loyalty to them. It was quite the contrary. And I think the Muslim Brotherhood is slowly starting to experience that as well. So they need to open up significantly and be prepared to deal with the difficult questions rather than, you know, basically backing off and saying, well, we're done with this or done with that.
Ramesh, you mentioned older media. I'm curious, what influence do you think traditional media still has in Egypt and even in the Middle East?
Well, as Adele pointed out, older media definitely dominates the media spectrum out there, right? I mean, especially the state TV and very volatile, self-serving corporate media in the domestic sphere. However, from the outside in, or from the grassroots and circulating down from the top, activists can use newer forms of media to actually force, the stories and the agendas of older forms of media to reach more people in new ways. So in other words, seeing this example that I just pointed out of the young man at the factory, by distributing this and putting pressure on international news networks, including Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, to actually document what's going on in this protest, older media is being influenced in such a way. There's a prevailing narrative that all the youth and the liberal parties and the leftist parties were basically clinging to their iPhones or clinging to their laptops. And once that all went down, they've lost power in Egypt. But Mosireen and these examples that I observed firsthand in factories like Mahalla, that I actually observed, are actually examples of how issue-driven campaigns, tactical-driven campaigns, are ways in which youth and progressive parties are influencing power from the outside in or from the grassroots up.
I feel like I want to high-five you, Ramesh, because we're in such tandem. It's incredible. I think awesome. one of the things that happens when you have a transforming media landscape is that for media organizations to remain credible and remain reputable in the eyes of the public, they have to be able to internalize the discourses that matter. And in this case, in Egypt now, we have a growing independent media that, to survive, actually have to rebroadcast Mosireen's work, have to at least tag them or reconnect with what's going on the ground. So if you're an independent newspaper in Egypt, if you're a major broadcaster in Egypt, you absolutely have to know what Mosireen and Kazibun have done. In fact, Kazibun has broadcast some of their videos, or they didn't broadcast, but some major networks, private networks in Egypt, have rebroadcast it. So we're starting to see this convergence of the mainstreaming of alternative narratives. So what begins as a very, very small scale, activist, effort online, all of a sudden magnifies and amplifies and can reach the 70 million households in Egypt through televised broadcasting, even though the state is rigid.
Sharif, only about 30 seconds left, but what have the consequences been? Threats, hacking, surveillance? What's happened to you guys?
Well, I'm sure we're being surveilled. That seems to be an inevitability here and everywhere. But I think that we have kept our actions as public as possible and try and rally a base of support that knows who we are and what we do and how we do it. And that is the best defense. I mean, we haven't been explicitly attacked other than verbally and on marches, just like everybody else who's gone out there and called the military liars. And I think that is because people know what we do and know who we are. But if I can say one last thing,
I'm going to have to actually end you right there. I'm sorry because we're out of time. But Ramesh, Adele, and Sharif, thank you so much for joining us today. Great discussion. We do want to head over to Malika, though, who's got a couple other leads we're following.
As residents of the eastern U.S. brace for the full impact of Hurricane Sandy, the buzz online has reached a fever pitch, with more than 1 million mentions of the massive storm over the past week. From the western U.S. to as far away as Indonesia, netizens are using the hashtag to express concern, swap stories, and share pictures like this one from Amon, who writes, "Hurricane Sandy approaching New York." His photo has been retweeted more than 600 times. Much of the storm-related online traffic has been to weather.com, the site for the U.S. Weather Channel, which is reported to have received 960 million page views in just 3 days. Web users are also flocking to this site, a Google crisis map showing the storm's current position, locations of emergency shelters, and links to YouTube videos. Many of those videos are being uploaded by citizen journalists like this one from Tim Pool, who's live streaming the storm from New York. Well, the hurricane has already left behind a trail of deadly destruction in the Caribbean, and bloggers there are sharing their stories. This photo is taken from a Facebook page set up in support of the storm's victims in Haiti. Others documented the damage on Twitter. Jacqueline writes, "Unfortunately, a common theme, cars stuck in the water in Haiti." Similar scenes are circulating online from Cuba. Storify user Mark collected a series of tweets and images showing the destruction in Santiago in the wake of the storm. We'll continue to track the storm and its aftermath, so stay in touch. Send us pictures and videos using hashtag AJStream. Lisa?
All right, on Tuesday, more than 700 Kurdish political prisoners across Turkey are on a hunger strike demanding rights. Send us your thoughts on that. Until then, we'll see you online.